Danielle from Bubbly Ducky here. In case you are unfamiliar, you can see all of my soaps and such at bubblyducky.com. Today I want to talk to you about lye. One of the biggest questions I get whenever I'm at a pop-up, craft show, vendor show, whatever you want to call them, is are your soaps made with lye? Sometimes this is a positive. Sometimes somebody's looking for lye soap. They say, a lot of people think that lye soap is good for poison ivy or any number of other things. Others don't want lye soap. They think that lye soap is going to harm them in some way. So I get positive and negative, but the crazy thing is all soap is lye soap. So I want to talk to you guys about it and hopefully just get some good information out there. So excuse me, I'm going to be glancing down frequently because I need notes, otherwise I ramble and my brain kind of does its own thing. So big 2 points I want to start with first. One, soap cannot be made without lye. It's impossible. Second, properly made soap does not have any lye left in it. So even though the soap was made with lye, there is not lye in the finished product. So let's break it down a little bit. So start with, what is soap? So if you can Google the definition of soap. There's several variations, but when it comes down to it is by definition saponified oils. So oils are fatty acids. The only way you can saponify those oils is by mixing them with a highly alkaline substance such as lye. So for hard soaps, you're going to have sodium hydroxide lye. For liquid soaps, you're going to have potassium hydroxide lye. Either way, it's going to have lye. So a question, of course, that comes right after that is, isn't lye harmful? Yes, by itself. By itself, if you were to just, touch lye or ingest lye, that would be very harmful. Don't do that. You'll see that when I'm making soap in my videos, I'm always wearing gloves because you do have to be careful with it. But when used properly, lye is no longer harmful. For instance, the lye I use is food grade lye, and when I first started doing this, I thought, food grade lye? Who eats lye? It's actually used for pretzels. So most of your pretzels, they're nice and shiny on the outside. They're shiny like that because they were dipped in a lye solution. So obviously you don't dip food in poisonous substances. So it's when used appropriately, lye is good. So when it comes to soaps, that is highly related to the saponification process. So the way that works, let me go back to my notes here because I'm really going to get lost if I don't. So every oil, every butter has which a butter is pretty much just a solid oil or a harder oil. And they all have what's called a saponification value. So that is how many milligrams of lye is needed to make soap out of a gram of this substance. So for instance, the shea butter, the saponification value is 0.13. So that means if I add 0.13 grams of lye or milligrams, of lye to 1 gram of shea butter, that is going to turn into soap. At the end of the day, that 1.13 grams, or that math isn't quite right, just over a gram of shea butter it's not going to be shea butter anymore, and it's not going to be lye anymore. It's going to be soap. It is a new substance. It is a chemical reaction that creates that new substance. The lye is gone, the shea butter is gone. Okay? Perfectly safe to use. At that measurement, not great on skin, but I'll get to that. Now, if I were to use 0.15 milligrams of lye, which is higher than that saponification value, with still only 1 gram of shea butter, then I'm using too much lye for that shea butter, and that is not going to be good for your skin. So it is very important to use it properly, as I've said. So we want soap not just to be okay, but great, right? We want it to feel good. You've probably heard me say before, I want it to look good, feel good, smell good, kind of appease as many senses as possible. So then we go to super fatting. So most of the soap that you buy, definitely Bubbly Ducky soap, has what's called a super fat. So what is a super fat? This is probably the one time in life that super fat is a really positive thing. unlike if I heard that in any other part of my life, I might be upset. But it's a positive thing. So a super vet is when you use more oils than necessary, essentially. That's the quick thing. That's the quick explanation. So if the saponification value is 0.13 milligrams of lye for 1 gram of shea butter, then what I can do is say, well, I'm not going to use 0.13, I'm going to use 0.11. And then there's shea butter left over that does not get saponified. So it's mixed on in there, but it hasn't become soap. It's just extra shea butter. So that's where you get that conditioning goodness on your skin. That's where you get the lotiony, creamy lather. So it doesn't strip your skin. If I were to use exactly the right saponification value, you're essentially making like something you would use on clothes or dishes, but not skin because it strips. So you want that extra oil, that super fat, to give those conditioning qualities. So not only is lye soap okay to use, but it's really great to use it if made properly. So obviously the next question is, well, then why did somebody else tell me that there wasn't any lye in the soap? So I have seen soap advertised as having no lye in it. Typically this falls into a couple of categories. Usually somebody that's newer, maybe, still learning a little bit. So one reason could be that they're using melt and pour. So there are many different ways you can make soap. One way is what you see me do, which is cold process. It's essentially from scratch. So there's cold process and hot process. Both of those are from scratch. I am getting oils and lye and additives, and I'm mixing them all up, and I'm making a batter, which then saponifies and turns into soap. Another method you can use is melt and pour. So that is buying a pre-made base. So that base, it's already soap. You cut it into chunks, you melt it down, you add colors, fragrance, additives, whatever you want to add, and then you put it in a mold and you make soap. So technically the soap is already made at that point. Technically the person who is adding the color, adding the fragrance, is not handling lye. They did not use lye in their process, but that pre-made base was made with lye. So that's one thing that I have seen a few times, is where the maker's saying, well, I don't use lye. Technically accurate, not fully right for the product though. That product should still list sodium hydroxide or potassium hydroxide, depending on the substance, if it's hard or soft, in their ingredients. Another situation that I've seen is that it's not technically soap. So you will see that some products are advertised as a body wash, a body bar. Those are probably the two most popular names, but pretty much lots of words that aren't soap. So it's really close, but it's not quite. Those sometimes don't have any lye in them, or were not made with lye, because as I said, no soap should have lye in it once you're using it. But those would not be made with lye necessarily, because they technically aren't soap. They are detergents. So obviously body detergent is kind of a weird name. Nobody wants to equate their body with their dishes. So so instead of saying body detergent, they're called, like I said, body wash, body bar, something along those lines. And you'll usually see a much higher ingredient list because they use a different mix of surfactants. It's just different. It's just not soap. Just the FDA definition for soap specifically has to have saponified oils. And then the last one, and this, I've only seen this a couple of times, but there can sometimes be some confusion over just what lye is. So as I mentioned, there's two types of lye typically used, sodium hydroxide or potassium hydroxide. And I've seen only one instance that I can think of where a soap maker said, well, I don't use lye, I use sodium hydroxide. Sodium hydroxide is lye, so it's just some confusion. In all of these situations, the person who is saying they haven't used lye, from what I've seen, it's not malicious. They're not necessarily trying to mislead anybody. They just don't know. So, so that leads to some misinformation out there. But at the end of the day, the main takeaways are, yes, soap is made with lye. No, you're not putting lye on your body when you use the soap because it's undergone a chemical process, so it's no longer there. And yes, it's wonderful to use. if made right. Soap, not lye. It's wonderful to use on your skin when it's made properly. And kind of just segue off a little bit with that, that's also, that whole process is why, if you've ever asked me, is your soap all natural? I'm always hesitant to answer that, because technically, even when you start out with all these natural ingredients, soap goes through saponification. So it's going through a chemical process, and by definition, if it's gone through a chemical process, it's no longer natural. So you might hear me say something like, I use a lot of natural ingredients, as opposed to just saying my soap is all natural, because I do feel like, even though that's not a regulated term, it does feel misleading calling any soap all natural, because it's not. You're probably, though technically, I mean, in the right circumstances, if you had maybe like a grease fire or something, because lye is created with ash and oil would be the grease. I don't know. I guess you could technically naturally find soap somewhere, but it would have had to have gone through that chemical process either way. So got a little nerdy today, got our science on, but hopefully this helps some of you that have been just curious on that subject, and or maybe just curious about how this works in general. I get a lot of questions on my videos, so hopefully I didn't bore you and this is interesting. I will put a blog post out as well, so you can watch or you can read, whatever works for you. See you guys. Oh, and if you just want to see soap, go to bubblyducky.com. Thanks.